Welcome to the Election University podcast, a weekly show where we hear from industry experts who share tips and tricks for winning campaigns. Whether you're running for office now, thinking about it for the future, or just want to know more about campaigns and elections, Election University is for you. With Election University, click, learn, win. And now your hosts, Jason Bennett and Rainey Cohen.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
How you doing today, Rainey?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jason?
I'm doing just fine. I got scolded the last time for asking our audience how they were doing in a rhetorical sort of way.
They can't reply.
I understand that. I'm just being friendly. I'm so friendly, you know. Excited about today's interview. We have, we're changing things up a little bit on the podcast here. We're going to start talking with some folks that are developing different tools and technologies to help campaigns, low-cost tools and technologies that are helping campaigns, you know, turn out the vote, get in contact with more donors, broaden their reach, do more outreach, whatever it is that the campaign is trying to accomplish. These tools are going to make it easier for them to do. And so today we're talking to the CEO of VoterCircle. His name is Sangeeth Peruri, and I'm excited to chat with him today.
Yeah, the idea behind VoterCircle is that you use your network of friends to help promote, to do like targeted GOTV among your friends, right?
Exactly.
Do I have that right?
Yep, exactly. And I think what you do is you create an account. We'll have Sangeeth walk us through more of the specifics of it, but the gist of it is that you connect your contacts list to this program, and the program allows the user to basically promote candidates effortlessly from their home, for example.
So I have an example of this. In a congressional campaign, like a year and a half ago, I received an email from a friend of mine who was supporting a particular candidate in this race. And I remember being surprised, like, why is this person emailing me about this candidate they support? And it turns out they had been connected with VoterCircle, and it was a way for there to be just more personal outreach in support of this candidate. Right. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
So we're going to talk to the CEO today. VoterCircle has been used in the Virginia elections. A few episodes ago, we talked to Deandra Musgrave, who had worked in Virginia as a fundraiser. VoterCircle was instrumental in some of those races and in increasing voter outreach, and also in Alabama. So I'm curious to talk to him about those races and how it was effective and how was it used and how exactly it was leveraged and what was the net result. Curious to hear from him about it. A little bit about Sangeeth. He's the CEO of VoterCircle. He's also an elected official. He's a school board member in Los Altos.
Love it. Down ballot races.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to talk to him a little bit about his election, why he decided to run for office. He is now the president of the Los Altos School District Board of Trustees. That's a little bit of a mouthful, but I'm excited to ask him a few questions about his election and what motivated him to run for office. So without further ado, let's get into our interview. Sangeeth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's really exciting the work you're doing, and we're happy to be part of it.
So we'll get into your background a little bit. We, in the intro, gave a little bit of a high-level view of your background, but we'd love to know a little bit more about, you know, what the work that you did. How'd you get involved in campaigns, and how'd you get involved in VoterCircle specifically?
Yeah, so my background, it's not your typical political tech background. I started out as a hedge fund manager, and that's what I had done for most of my career. And by 2012, I was getting a little tired of it. And so I decided to shift careers, and I wanted to do work in education. So I retired from Wall Street, and I started working with our local schools in California. And I was traveling up and down the state, working with low-income school districts, and this had pretty much become a full-time job for me. I was on 4 or maybe 5 nonprofit education boards at the time. And then I was asked to run for my local school board, and that was my initial foray into politics. And after that race, after seeing some of the inefficiencies, we ended up starting VoterCircle.
I'm assuming you're a Democrat and that VoterCircle works with Democratic candidates specifically?
We are a progressive platform, and our policy as it stands right now, we started out nonpartisan because what we really wanted to do was, bring the whole country together and our president has made that very, very difficult. And our first 99 out of 100 clients were Democratic. And so we ended up changing our policy to be progressive, where state ledge and above nationwide, our policy is non-Republican. And then for down ballot and nonpartisan races, it's technically an open platform, although we don't actively solicit Republican candidates or groups. It's really hard to know what the party affiliation is of a down ballot candidate.
Right. Because so many of them are nonpartisan races anyway.
Exactly.
So I guess, just for my own curiosity, I'm curious to know who, someone who is part of the Democratic Party and working with Democrats who comes from Wall Street. How's that been for you, particularly maybe during the 2016 election cycle?
Well, 2016 was a little depressing. I mean, we did well in a lot of our races, but, you ended November with a president that I didn't expect to get elected. And so that was clearly a little depressing. Since then, Democrats have been doing well, and so that's been great. We worked with the DNC in Virginia and supporting all of the 90 or so candidates that ran in November there, from state ledge on above. We worked on the Doug Jones race as well in Alabama. So working on those races has been exhilarating, and it's been a privilege to be part of those successes. But the thing with working in political tech versus working in Wall Street, every day you're spending time with people that want to change the lives for people around them better. And they're in this not to get rich. They're in this to make our country and our world a better place. And that is really fulfilling. So I love being able to work with people that are trying to work for the good of others.
That's great. Can you tell us a little bit more specifically about what VoterCircle is? We talked a little bit in the intro about what it is, but I'm wondering if you can really help us understand a little bit more specifically what it can do for down ballot races.
And also, what was your vision for creating it? How did it even come about?
Exactly.
Sure. So my race was a little bit, it was an interesting race. We have a small town of around 30,000 voters. And we had a small campaign budget, around $4,000, like many down ballot races. And things were going well. We thought that was more than enough money, since most of the previous elections, people hadn't spent a lot of money on their races. And then an outside PAC came in and decided to target our race and put in over $100,000 against us in our race. And so overnight, we found ourselves being severely under-resourced. The opponents had 6 or 7 direct mail pieces. They had paid walkers, paid yard sign holders. There was robocalls, Facebook ads, newspaper ads. And we were doing phone and door, but it just didn't feel like it was enough. And then things went to a more crazy level. There was a local group. We're not sure who started it, but it was quite successful, that started a fake news campaign against us. And they started spreading false rumors all around town. And it got so loud that by the summer of that year, in August of 2014, I had local mayors asking me to pull out of the race.
Whoa.
And it was traumatic. I remember calling my campaign manager. She was bawling on the phone. And we just did this to help our town and our kids. And we were really upset by all of it. And we didn't know what to do. We were doing phone and door, but people didn't know if they should trust me or my volunteers or what they read online. So we regrouped and we decided to try a strategy to see if real people could fight fake news. And what we decided to do was leverage a friend-to-friend outreach approach. So we mapped out our town, figured out who all the key influencers were, had them send out messages to all of their friends, and it worked amazingly well, because the people we were getting to send out those messages, we identified the senior leaders, the school leaders, the youth sports, churches, PTA moms and dads, as well as our friends. And when people heard the real story, they got really upset. Momentum started building, and they started telling their friends about our campaign. And we ended up winning by almost a 50% margin versus the PAC-based candidates. So they ended up spending over $11 per vote. We spent 40 cents per vote.
Wow.
That's crazy. What was the motivation for them going after you?
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah, so I was a first-time candidate. I'd never run for office, and I've generally been pro schools in terms of my education policies and views on education, there was two staunchly charter supporting candidates in the race, and the California Charter School Association decided to support those candidates. So in some ways I was fighting the billionaires, and we won this one. So it was a great victory, but it was hard going up against that because we didn't know what was going on, and it was a highly sophisticated operation that we were going against.
Like in my head, I'm giving you a standing ovation for like winning against the like big corporate. I don't know, corporate education, is that a thing? I don't know, but
you raised how much money then to combat this multi-$100,000 campaign against you?
I think ultimately the PAC-based opponents spent $120,000 and we spent $4,000.
Wow.
God.
It's David and Goliath right there.
It very much was. But you know, it had a happy ending, right? Because if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have figured out this idea of friend-to-friend outreach, and we wouldn't have started VoterCircle. So,
right.
You know, sometimes they say everything has a point, and you know, this will hopefully be a good thing.
So you take this experience on this school board race and this idea that, you know, friend-to-friend outreach works. It translated into some big impact on your campaign. How do you decide to turn that into a tech tool for campaigns, and what is that process like?
So I'd always wanted to start a company, but it never quite struck me that I was going to start a company after this race. The whole process was, you know, overwhelming. And after the race, I was unwinding with my wife's family. And my brother-in-law was in between jobs and was working as a consultant part-time. And he was hearing me vent about the race, and he just started coding. And he's like, hey, would this work? What if you had done this on your race? And I had kind of done a precursor to VoterCircle that had hacked in a bunch of things with Google Spreadsheets and Gmail and Google Groups and et cetera on my race. But, you know, it was very brute force. And he came up with an automated version that was an initial pilot. And I said, that's interesting. So he said, all right, go back home, follow up with your consultant and campaign friends. And if they like it, you know, I'm willing to start a company with you. So I went back home, and then another one of my good friends was a volunteer on my campaign. The both of us spent a couple months doing research and diligence, and he was willing to join on. So then the three of us started the company in early 2015.
Wow. That's great. Let's talk about VoterCircle specifically. What does it do? If I'm a down ballot campaign and I've got limited funds, what can I use and how can I leverage VoterCircle for my campaign?
Sure. So there's basically three things that we do. So we enable supporters of any cause or campaign to instantly find all of their friends that are registered voters in any given district. So we'll enable them to import their personal address books on Gmail, Yahoo, etc. We will keep all of that information private. We'll automatically map that against the campaign's voter file to figure out which of their friends are registered voters in your district. So the first thing we do is we help your supporters figure out who they know that are actual voters in the district. And so in my race, when I had done this manually in 2014, I went through my contacts I have 10, 12,000 Gmail contacts, and I found 100 friends that were voters in my district. In 2016, I was volunteering for my parcel tax in our local town, and we used VoterCircle again. Within a minute, VoterCircle found 900 voters in my 12,000 contacts. So I had actually missed 800 voters in my own contacts. So that's the first thing that we do, is we figure out which of your friends are voters. The second thing we do is we enable each of your supporters to send a message that goes from them to their friends. When typically campaigns do everything as cold outreach, whether it's a door knock, a phone call, Facebook, texting, direct mail, it's all cold anonymous outreach, and individuals that have no pre-existing relationship with the voter are reaching out to voters. What we do is we enable supporters to send messages from them that goes to their campaign or to their friends that are voters. And that's way more persuasive. So we end up getting 50% open rates from the messages we send, 10 to 30% open click-through rates. And so we get much higher levels of engagement. And so that's the second thing we do is friend-to-friend messaging. And the third thing, and this is the most powerful, is we take all of this data to rank and score every voter in the electorate to figure out who the most connected voters are. And we call those people super influencers. And what we're able to find is the people in the community that are creating the social fabric of that community. So church leaders, Rotary Club leaders, school parents, school leaders, youth sports leaders. Imagine if you could figure out who the 100 most connected people are in your electorate. Those are the type of people that we find. And there's no database or social network to find those individuals. So when you can find them, we help you activate and connect them to all the voters around them. So those are the three things that we do.
Let's talk about this from a perspective of maybe somebody under 60 years of age who doesn't really keep the addresses of their contacts on their contacts list and pairing it up with a voter file. How is it matching based on address? Because I'm just thinking about my own contacts list. That's just a random assortment of cell phones and emails.
Maybe first and last names if you're lucky.
Yeah. I think I might keep some addresses for like a holiday card list, but that's pretty small list of folks scattered across the country. So how do you fill in some of those gaps, and how is the matching with the voter file work?
So what you'll find if you've been doing this long enough is voter files are incomplete in their information, and people's address books are even more incomplete. And we're most commonly matching and importing address books from Gmail, Yahoo, etc. And what we've gotten really good at is we have all these algorithms that have figured out how to do matching with partial information. So I can't really go into all of the secret sauce there, but that is what we do. We match on every single available field that we can: name, email, address, phone number, zip code. And when that information is not available, we have these algorithms that help improve our matching.
Got it.
And that's one of the key things that we figured out.
And like, what's the level of accuracy?
It's not 100%.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So it's not 100%, but generally of the matches that we are getting, it's in the 80s or 90s percent sort of match rates. Now, the campaigns can tweak those. They can make the matching really tight so there's no false positives, or they can make it a little bit looser so there's a little bit more false positives, but you get a wider reach. But the magic of our system is the individual canvasser decides who they send, when they send, and what they send. So if we say, hey, these are your 100 friends in your contacts that are voters, you can remove 5 or 10 of your friends as needed. So in my example, I had 900 matches. I think 850 of them were good matches. So I removed 50 names from that list. Some were names that were bad matches. Other were people in the town that I knew were not supportive of our efforts or were bad neighbors that I didn't want to be messaging, et cetera.
Right. All of that makes sense. I think the question is the voter file. So does your system come loaded with the voter file, or does someone have to obtain the voter file first and then upload it to the system? How do people get that contact? How do candidates acquire the information to match with their contacts list?
Sure. So when we first started, we would ask the campaigns to bring their own voter files, and a lot of campaigns still do that. But now we've made that process much easier. So we have nationwide agreements with Catalyst, Target Smart, and NGP Van. And most of our clients are bringing in files from the party. So if you get approval from the party, you would basically get an API key between NGP Van and VoterCircle. And we have a two-way integration. And basically the voter data would come straight from the state party file into VoterCircle. We can also get you voter files from Target Smart or Catalyst in California. We do a lot of work with PDI, and we have a great relationship with them. And in some areas, people get voter files from the Secretary of State or the Registrar of Voters. So pretty much any type of voter file works with us. But those are, as well as we do some clients with Nation Builder voter files as well. But those are kind of the 4 or 5 vendors where we've had the vast majority of data coming in from.
So I have a question about open rates and click-throughs.
Sure.
During the 2016 campaign on a congressional race, I was definitely identified as a voter, a friend of a person who was using VoterCircle. And I recall receiving at least 4 different emails in support of this same candidate from 4 of my friends, where the content inside was clearly not written by my friends. Like when Sam showed up in my email box and I opened it, I was like, this email is not written by Sam. I mean, I support this candidate and I'm clicking through and I'm going to like do the action anyway because I'm a good friend and I'm supporting my candidate. But I'm wondering how often, like what advice do you give to people who are creating messages that they are sending to their friends that they want to support candidates? And do you see, I don't know, any drop off or loss of people because they're, I don't know, having a reaction like I did?
Yeah. It's a great question. So interesting thing. I think I know which campaign you are referring to. Usually we have a default set that no more than 3 supporters can send a message to the same voter. I recall the campaign you were working on increased that level to 10, which is the max we have in the system. And so they probably sent you more messages than our typical campaign does. And then in terms of the messaging, we recommend that the individual supporter personalize the message. They don't always do that. So what we've done is we've tried to make it a little bit easier to personalize the message within the system. But that is one limitation that you are going to get, that unless someone spends that time, they'll have a default from the campaign. We encourage them to personalize it. They always don't. But that's how the system works right now. If we were to, it was interesting. The first cycle, we gave them no default, and every campaign really struggled to write a message. In the second cycle, we had a really good prescriptive message, and everyone loved that message so much they all used the same one. And so we would have opponents sending out the same messages, which didn't make any sense.
Oh, no.
So now, we had a Palo Alto city council race locally where I think 7 of the 11 candidates used it, and all 7 had the same message going out from their supporters.
Oh, no.
Which became a little, so it was a little silly. So now what we have in the system, it kind of gives you a rubric and it gives you your quick tips. We recommend trying to keep the message short, under, I think, 200 words or something like that. And we want the messages to be warm and personal and have a little bit of a sense of urgency. We're also recommending that campaigns do more of a messaging calendar where they're sending out messages every month or 6 weeks or 2 months, as opposed to 1 or 2 messages. But the key thing that we really try to emphasize is these messages should be friend to friend. They should be something where someone should feel happy to send this to their friend because they feel like they're doing a service to them, they're informing them, they're educating them. And similarly, the recipient should want to get this message. It should not be one of these Democratic or Republican Party messages that just says, give me $5 every other minute. This should be something where both the recipient and the sender feels like they're doing something of value.
Yeah. So let's talk results, because I think our listeners who are interested in very low cost, free tools want to have a sense of what this can do for their campaign. And obviously the click-through rate is impressive. That is a great click-through rate for email messages for sure. But what does this do for turnout, for example? And does any of this change based on maybe partisanship of the race, the size of the race, locality? Does any of that impact, how the results might change based on the race?
So it's interesting. We in the last year and a half, we've worked on, I think 500 or 600 plus campaigns around the country. And we haven't seen any big patterns in terms of demographics or rural versus urban. What we found is the most successful campaigns are those that start early and are organized. And that's really the most important thing in terms of having a successful effort. And what's interesting is why the platform seems to work so well. And some of this is by luck and some by skill. Right now it's primarily email. We'll have texting and social and a lot of other things coming in. But we started with email for a couple reasons. Our initial thinking was email is where the voters are. So if you look at the demographics of people that use email and the demographics of people that vote, they're a very high overlap. So we thought if we're going to start in one area, we should start with email first, then go to texting, and then go to social, because that's where the voters are and that's where you get the awareness and persuasion impact. Now, there's another fascinating thing that we've figured out with emails. If you look at any campaign, and we've seen this everywhere, the most connected individual in any community are parents. The parents are very well connected, they're very influential, and they know many, many people. So the number one advice I would give any local campaign is to make a list of every single school in your district and try to get to know the PTA leaders and PTA presidents at every single one of those schools. The PTA presidents are going to be by far the most connected and influential individuals in any local race. And if you think about parents and PTA presidents, they have to use email because they have to be on their school room parent list. They have to be on there for youth sports and church and Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. So the way our system works is when we're matching and mining data from Gmail, Yahoo, et cetera, we are uncovering these email networks. And the way Gmail and Yahoo works is we can actually mine all the virtual contacts on there as well. BCC'd or CC'd, we can analyze all that data as well. So we have this trifecta where you are finding parents who are the most connected individuals. We're able to mine and create large virtual networks by the way our email platform works. And number three, those are the people that vote. And the end result is we're getting really good open rates and engagement rates, 50% plus or minus, 10 to 30% click-through rates, and turnout bumps. When we measure it, we're getting 5 to 10 points for likely voters in up-ballot races, and we're getting 10 to 20 points higher with down-ballot races and unlikely voters.
Well, so that's a whole lot of data to be mining from people. Can you talk to us a little bit about the privacy protections that you have in place on this program?
Absolutely. And this is one of the key features that we've figured out and that we've actually patented around the product. If you look at our users that create accounts, we're finding somewhere around 2/3 are willing to import their contacts in the VoterCircle. And the reason they're willing to do it is we heavily protect their privacy. Any information that's imported into VoterCircle from a supporter is kept private. It's not released to the campaign. We don't sell or share that data. We don't advertise to those individuals. We don't contact those individuals. It's your private political Gmail tool, if you will. And we have patents that we filed that allows us to take personal individual supporter data and then take campaign data. We basically open up a tunnel, analyze all that data, and then close that off. So the supporter's data goes back to the supporter, and the campaign's data goes back to the campaign. Now, to make sure this is still valuable to the campaign, what we do is we provide the voter IDs of all of the relevant stats on VoterCircle. So every voter that's been reached, that's opened a message, that's clicked on a survey response, that's released their email address, all of that is tagged by voter ID. If they're using VAN, it'll automatically be sent to your VAN. And that is what the campaigns use for their data. And so that way we don't have to release personal email addresses or any personal contact information of any individual person off of an address book. And similarly, campaign data is kept with the campaign, and we are not reselling or mixing data at the moment.
That's great. So can you talk to us a little bit about pricing? What's the pricing structure for VoterCircle, and what are the features in each of the different price points?
Sure. So we have, for any campaign less than 500,000 voters, right now the pricing is fairly straightforward. For small down-ballot races, we have a free platform that is available. It's a limited feature set, but it should work well for small electorate sizes. And then we have another plan that's around $150 a month, and that allows you to do volunteer recruitment, one-click email acquisition, automated surveys for the voters in your electorate. And then we have our flagship edition, which is $250 a month, and that also allows you to segment and target individual types of voters. And so most sophisticated campaigns, consultant-run campaigns, like the flagship version, down-ballot races, often take the free version, and then there's other campaigns in between based on their budgets. then we also have enterprise pricing for large and statewide and national races.
Cool. So talk to us a little bit about the 2017 cycle, if you don't mind. Oh,
do you need to get that?
Do you need to get the door?
I think I'm okay, but hopefully that wasn't too loud in the.
It's fine. We'll cut it. We'll cut it. That's not a problem.
Or we'll leave it. Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Kind of funny, actually.
Real life is happening.
I don't know exactly how many races that we ended up doing in 2017. It must have been 300, 400, 500, somewhere in that ballpark. We did worked with around 100 campaigns in Virginia. We did two things in Virginia. Win Virginia worked with us. We had worked with Tom Perriello in the primary in Virginia, and then he ran the Win Virginia PAC, and they hired us to help with 40 or 50 local delegate races in Virginia. And then the DNC hired us to help all 87 delegates, as well as Northam, Fairfax, and Herring. So we rolled out our Elect Virginia tool in Virginia in November. And the way that tool worked, there was a link that we provided the DNC that they spread across their network. Anyone could click on that link. It would find all of their friends that were voters, remove the voters that were Republicans, and then it would send, supporters could send a message to their friends that would actually change based on where they lived. So if they lived in one part of the state, it would say, vote for your local delegate that lives in Arlington. And if you were in another place in the state, it would say, vote for your local delegate, as well as Fairfax, Herring, and Northam in that part of town. So it was location-based messaging, which we rolled out with the DNC, which is pretty exciting. Then we thought we would get a little bit of a break, and we got called by the Doug Jones campaign, I think almost the next day. So we started working on their race pretty feverishly for the next month. And then we got a little bit of rest in December. But it was a good year. We went from maybe 100 races in 16 to 300-400 in 17. And we really didn't know if we'd do more or less races, because 17 was supposed to be a down year.
Right. But we all ended up on an upswing, that's for sure. And on behalf of Democrats across the country, thank you for your part in those two fantastic wins. They provided a lot of buoyancy for the rest of us slogging away. So thank you for your work in that.
Well, we can't take credit for the win. We were helpful, and it was exciting to be part of the process.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your election and your school board race. You know, you gave us some great background on your race. I'm wondering if you have advice for first-time candidates, you know, knowing what you went through in your race and looking back now on it, what advice would you give first-time candidates or folks who are thinking about running for office?
So I would give a couple pieces of information. One, start early and be organized. And that's important with VoterCircle, but that's important for any campaign. The next thing that I would recommend is to really understand why you want to run for office and have a very clear and simple message. So when people ask me why I run for office, and when they ask me what do I think about being on school board, for me, it's always the same. I did it for the kids, and I serve on the school board for the kids. And I want to improve the curriculum and the education that our kids have. I was very fortunate. Growing up, I had all these learning disabilities, and it was my public school teachers that got me through it. And if it wasn't for their support, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so that is what I wanted to make sure our district was doing as well. And so for me, it was just kids, kids, kids. But I find a lot of candidates don't really understand why they're running, and they haven't thought through it. And that kind of comes through. And then the next thing is, I really think finding parents and school leaders is the most important thing any local race should do. And this is congressional, state house, state ledge, and anything smaller than that. Find all your schools, get to know the school communities. Those are the most engaged parents or people in your community. Spend a lot of time with school parents.
That's super cool.
Spoken like a president of a school board. Well done.
Love it.
One other question. Tell us a little bit about your American Ninja Warrior submission. I want to hear more about that.
Well, if you look on YouTube, you can type in Sangeeth Peruri, American Ninja Warrior, and a couple videos.
Oh, I have. I have done this.
We may have watched them already.
Oh, that was an amazing episode in my life. So I had left work in 2012, and I had to forcefully leave my career. I was on Wall Street for 12 years, and my employer fired me, and they never told me why. And that was another big traumatic event in my life. And I sued them, and I won. That whole process was grueling. It took 5 years or so. But I needed some stress relief, and I had some excess time on my hands. And American Ninja Warrior was the only show that my whole family watched. So my wife and my kids would always be watching this. And I got this crazy idea that, hey, that is something that I could kind of do. Maybe I should go try it. So then I started going to local gymnastics places and training, doing parkour and gymnastics. I found a local Ninja Warrior gym. I started training there. And then I created a video, and my brother-in-law happens to be a filmmaker, movie director, and he made it look really nice, and we submitted it. And all of a sudden they accepted me on the show, and I had like 3 months to train. I'd only been training for 3 months, so it was just this whirlwind. Yeah, I mean, being, 35, 36 at the time, and I'd never done any of this crazy stuff before. So I did the best I could. I got past the first obstacle. I failed on the second one, but it was an amazing experience.
That's
but
fantastic.
What's funny, after that tournament, we brought it back home and we started running local Ninja Warrior tournaments for my kids' school. So we have done 4 local tournaments where me and my co-founder, we built 30 obstacles in my basement and backyard. And we have these tournaments where we have 30 adults versus 30 kids. And we probably have 30 or 40 spectators as well. So we'll have 100 people running through the house, going through these obstacles. We have 2 stages. It's pretty awesome.
That's so many people in your house and yard, like doing destructive things.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, I am amazed that there is just an exclusive Ninja Warrior gym in your area. Like, does that exist? Do people?
Yeah, nationwide. Are there a bunch of these gyms?
We can just go train.
There are now, but the closest gym to me was an hour away, and that's part of the reason why I stopped training. If there was something 10, 20 minutes away, I would have done it, but an hour away was just tough. There's a handful in LA. There are some in Central California. There's 1 or 2 on the East Bay up here.
And there's one at your house.
There's one at your
There's
house.
one at my house. We started building all kinds of stuff.
That's amazing. Awesome. I know you have to run to a school board meeting, so thank you for taking the time out today. Before we let you go, can you tell us a little bit about the features that you're going to be implementing, and where can folks find and sign up for VoterCircle?
So you could just sign up anytime you want at VoterCircle.com. We announced our digital slate and advocacy platforms late last year, so that's been rolled out nicely. This week, we are launching our iPhone, Android, and new mobile app, so that's going to be coming out. And later on in the roadmap, we're going to have texting and social, and we have a very big roadmap of a lot of different features coming, and you'll have to stay tuned to see what we have in store. You can also sign up for our email newsletter online, or follow us on Facebook or Twitter and stay up to date with all the latest and greatest features.
And that's votercircle.com, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And if anyone wants to contact me directly, I'm at sang@votercircle.com. That's sang like I sang a song at votercircle.com.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sangeeth, so much for taking time out today. We really appreciate you walking us through VoterCircle.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Bye.
A big thank you to Sangeeth Peruri, CEO of VoterCircle. What'd you think?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting context to know that the emails I was receiving was in like their first year, and to hear how the company has grown and expanded and refined their tools since then. And I'm really excited for like the new stuff. I'm into texting actions lately. So if they have a text format, I'm in.
Yeah. And especially since, I think a lot of the texting capabilities right now are pretty limited. So I'm excited to see how, they incorporate some emerging technologies around the texting and how this is going to work. It's fascinating. I was really interested in hearing some of the, I'm a results person. So I want to know, like, how is this really delivering votes on campaigns? How is it increasing turnout? Are people raising more money? And I think you walk through it pretty specifically. We should have been able to get a little bit more into what is the free platform versus the $150 a month platform. But folks can read about that online. We'll include it in the show notes, links to the breakdown of the features and whatnot. So.
Can we include his Ninja Warrior videos in the show notes?
That's not even an option. That's definitely mandatory viewing for anybody that's listening because it's so good. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Election University Podcast. While you're at it, why don't you hop on over to iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast on your favorite app and subscribe. We will deliver every Tuesday a new episode of Election University Podcast directly to your podcast app. And we'd love it if you left a review. We read them. We love them. We respond to them. We are getting ideas from our listeners on people we should have on the show. We have some very aggressive feedback that we're getting from people about ways that we should name our episodes and people we should have on. I'm actually getting friends who are upset that they have not been invited onto the podcast.
That's interesting.
They're going to have to wait their turn. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that have a lot of interesting information, and they're just going to have to take a number and get in line.
I mean, the podcast is going to last for years and years, so there's plenty of time to get everyone here on the...
That's true. We'll have to cycle around and get some of these folks who are...
Wait your turn.
I do like being begged to, though. It is a bit of an ego boost. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us for another episode. Until next time, I'm your co-host, Jason Bennett.
And I'm Rainey Cohen.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. This week's episode has ended, but the campaign fun doesn't have to. Head on over to www.electionu.com, where you can access all of the links mentioned in today's episode, as well as the show notes. There you can also sign up for regular announcements or register for our campaign school. It's your very own online personal trainer for winning campaigns. www.electionu.com. Click, learn, win.